I am Paul Carter Robinson, and I'm the moderator today for our chat and discussion with Janet Raddy, Simon Chadwick, and Annya Sand, who should have been first. I'm looking at this gallery view. This is why I'm. And today, in our discussion, we will be talking about the future of art mid-corona, which is where we all are today. The first line of questions will come in after everyone introduces themselves. So Annya, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I am an abstract artist. I'm based in London, and I have been a practicing artist for the last 17 years.
And Janet?
So I'm a gallerist and a curator, and I focus on the Middle East. I first started my business in 2007. I had a physical gallery for a short time in 2010, and now I work on pop-up exhibitions, and I'm currently curating an auction for Chiswick Auctions for Middle Eastern art in October.
And Simon?
Yes, hi there. I'm an associate in the Michigan Art Law team. I act for a wide variety of parties in the arts sector, whether it's galleries, individuals, charities, museums, and on both contentious and non-contentious matters.
And I'm Paul Carter Robinson. I'm the editor and CEO of Artlyst.com, which is an online publication. It was the first online full-fledged art magazine in the United Kingdom. We founded it in 2008, got going in 2010. And we really write about current news, art-related news, reviews, listings when galleries used to be open, but now they are reopening, which is good news for us, and features. And I think that we'll go into the first line of discussion now with everybody, now that we are all familiar with one another. And that is we're going to first start by discussing collaborations during COVID-19. And let's talk to Annya about collaborations. Have you been involved in any collaborations over this period?
No, I haven't lately. I have been working though by myself in my studio, which is isolated, luckily enough, and creating a new series of work, but I haven't done any collaborations for a while, actually.
And Janet, you mentioned that you were, I don't know if this is a collaboration, but I'm working with Chiswick Auctions for a Middle Eastern auction. Could you tell us a little bit about that? About the auction? Yes, well, it's itself. About the auction, thank you. It's the first time that Chiswick Auction have held a sale of contemporary Middle Eastern and North African art. They have a very strong department in the Islamic works of art and also Orientalist, but it was really my suggestion in collaboration with them to host the first auction, because I feel that there is a need, particularly now, and I just wanted to mention, as I know we're all aware about the very tragic situation that has just taken place in Beirut, and how all of our thoughts are with everybody in Beirut and from Beirut at the moment. So it's, in a sense, it's very, very topical, and I've been in discussions with them about this auction. So in that sense, yes, it is a collaboration. I'm not an employee of them directly, so I'm collaborating with them, and let's see what happens. It's on the 23rd of October, and everybody's welcome to participate at that point. I mean, bringing the subject back to the tragedy in Beirut, are you representing any Beirut artists currently? Yes, I am. Yes, there's an artist I work with whose gallery actually has been seriously affected. He's called Hannibal Sarouji. He himself is absolutely fine, but generally a lot of the artists, there's the Tanid Gallery, who were going to be talking to me about doing
the auction with me, putting some artists in. I don't know obviously if that's going to happen, but that whole gallery now has been flattened, doesn't exist anymore. So it's just awful, unfortunately. So all we can do is just hope that people are safe and well, but we all know how difficult the situation is there for them. So there is actually somebody else who's possibly going to be doing a charity auction for the Lebanese Red Cross, so we'll watch and see what happens there.
Well, I was on the BBC website earlier, and there is a URL for an appeal that's already been launched for helping those involved in Beirut, and it would probably be a very good idea if people from the art world joined together and showed their support.
Yeah,
now, Simon, I'm going to ask you the same. I'm sure, you know, as a leading lawyer involved with the legal side of the art world, collaborations are something that you probably have close to your heart. Now, could you tell me about some of the collaborations you've been working on?
Well, in all honesty, I haven't necessarily been working on collaborations, but I do think it's interesting to see the way that the art market's responded, because you've not only had the collaborations of galleries, large galleries such as David Sverner, opening up at the online viewing room with other smaller, maybe less known galleries. You've also had auction houses collaborating with dealers. I think just at the start of the pandemic, you had the Raphael Valls sale. You've then also had the various sales in New York and London, which are sales where dealers dealers only have put artworks in. So I think it's been an interesting way of responding to it. From a legal perspective, I think one of the things that certainly the smaller galleries need to be careful of is obviously if they have been fostering and looking after kind of young up and coming contemporary artists, and if the larger galleries see, you know, when they're sharing resources, see those artists kind of doing incredibly well, you know, there is a risk that they might try and poach those artists. So I think it's important for the smaller galleries to make sure that they have appropriate artist representation agreements in place, so to protect them against that sort of thing.
Everyone sees the legal side of things because there are going to be so many redundancies, for example, within the art world. I've heard that recently the South Bank is making 400 people redundant, and there's going to be an awful lot of that happening as the arts become sidelined with many other things that are byproducts of COVID. I think maybe we'll move on to the next question, unless someone else wants to elaborate. Okay. The online shift within the art world as a result of COVID-19, I think that you know, so many things have cropped up online, so many exhibitions, art fairs, and other things. So we'll start again with Annya, because I know that you've done a series of your own artwork that you have shared with us online. So Annya, would you like to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I do support the shift online in one way, but not in the other way, I think. So although the shift online is economical and environmentally friendly, it doesn't help the viewer to experience the full depth of the artwork itself, if that makes sense. You need the physical, I think, experience in order to be able to fully appreciate an artwork. And that has always been my concern about going online. It's very easy and fast. However, I feel that it's very, very sort of, it doesn't cover the full scale of what you can feel and experience when you're in front of a live work of art.
Janet, where has your shift gone on online? Tell us where you are on this.
I think, yeah, that's a very good question. And I agree with Annya as well, that one does need to see the work in person, but I think there's been huge progress made in the virtual technology. So for instance, I'm now using a platform. I'm the curator for an exhibition by an artist who also lives in Hastings, actually, called Patrick Altes, and we're using a platform called Kunstmatrix, and you enter that and you see the works on the walls as if it was a real exhibition space. It's not, it's all virtual, but it gives you as close a view as possible, a closer experience as possible as being in real life, but it's not the same thing. I think a lot of people are putting money into this idea of the virtual exhibition now. So there've been several new initiatives, one that's founded by Oliver Miro, who's the son of Victoria Miro, who's founded a platform called Vortic, and there's others like, Matterport are doing the same thing. They're actually scanning, 3D scanning physical, real life gallery spaces, and then using that scan or 3D technology, you can put the works into the virtual space. So it's definitely progressing hugely. The art fairs are trying it as well. They're working with Artland, independent art fair, just launched last week, and so you can look around the art fair. So people are making progress, but it will, I think, never replace the actual experience, because it's more than just even looking at an artwork as well. It's the whole experience you get of going to a gallery, going to an art fair, going to a museum. So let's see what happens.
And a lot of it is the human interaction, where you are actually communicating and talking about various works of art. Especially, you know, the client-dealer relationship is so important in the art world. So if you take the dealer out of it, it's very, you know, you're removing 50%.
But they have, I mean, they've introduced a chat function, so you can virtually chat with the dealer in his booth. But as you say, it's not quite the same thing as being there if you're in the gallery.
You know, from my experience many years ago as an art dealer, I think that it's so much the you know, the joy of talking to somebody and just sharing your knowledge with someone else, and they have always said, it's always been said that the client buys the dealer before they buy the artwork. And I think that many times that is the case.
Yes, no, you're right. It's about those relationships.
Simon, would you like to speak a little bit on this subject? I don't know, there must be a legal side to the use of images. There must be a lot of things from your standpoint.
Yeah, yes. I mean, firstly, I'd just like to say I think it's great that everything's gone online, or a lot more things are going online, as I think it opens it up to a wider audience. But you know, as Janice and you were saying, I think it takes away slightly from the emotional connection with an artwork if you can't see it in person. And also the art industry is a relationships industry that you know, face to face is always going to do better than via email. Just with regards to kind of potential legal issues, I mean, we've been working with a number of galleries in this regard. You know, there are issues that can arise with regards to whether the artwork matches, you know, for example, the color on the screen, whether it matches the same as actually the color in real life. So there's various provisions. We've had to get creative in our contracts and put in kind of provisions dealing with that sort of thing. Also the buyer is much more reliant on the descriptions of the artwork. You know, so there can be issues that arise with that. Buyers are buying the artwork without the ability to be able to inspect them properly in advance. So I mean, either, you know, there need to be requirements where condition report.
Simon, if you buy something on the internet, if I go to Amazon and buy it, and there are other retailers out there, if I go to a company like that and buy something, I have a return policy of 28 days. Is that the same in the art world?
Well, there's consumer regulations that apply that give you a 14-day right to cancellation for any reason at all. If, for example, that's not notified, then on the terms and conditions or on the website where you're purchasing it, it can extend to a period of 1 year and 14 days that you can return it. So it's one of the things that people need to be very careful with. There's other issues that kind of with regards to dealing with consumers in this regard, because as I mentioned, it opens up to a wider audience, and that's not only nationally, that's also internationally. And particularly with EU legislation, there is a risk that a gallery in the UK can find themselves being subject to, for example, French or German law, dependent on where the consumer's based, which can have very differing kind of outcomes for the gallery. Will obviously potentially mean that if an issue arises, they have to defend legal proceedings in another country, for example, or there might be quirks. For example, in German law, you can actually have an option contract, for example, or reservation contract, where someone says, I'll reserve this for 24 hours for you. If you don't abide by that under German law, then you can potentially be sued for damages. Under English law, such a contract wouldn't bind the other part, but bind the party reserving it, or the party that is reserved.
I think I also remember as a dealer, it was if someone came in and said, I want to reserve this and I'm giving you a deposit, if you take the deposit, they had 7 years to decide whether they wanted to buy it. And I think that was the way English law read. Precisely, if there is some sort of consideration, some sort of money paid towards the for the reservation, then there is a period of time. I wouldn't have thought that it would be 7 years. Quite a long time. It was something like that.
It might well be dependent also on if the reservation is in essence time limited, and whether it's been time limited by the dealer or the gallerist,
which is always wise. But back in the day, dealers really didn't think, and they thought that it was a wonderful thing that somebody wanted to buy something and put a deposit. But I think that you were stuck in a contract with them under English law that was 7 years. I think I remember this correctly.
I would think if you're trying to get out of that, you would have to take reasonable steps. For example, if the buyer disappears, you would have to take reasonable steps to locate the buyer, and to inform them that in essence that the contract's being terminated if they don't proceed. And subject to that and such reasonable steps being taken, you could then move on to sell it to another party.
Sure. Okay.
Can I add a point to that as well, though, which is another issue that nobody really seems to have covered, and that's regarding the VAT on the import of a work. So if you have a work, for instance, that's located in the US and you're selling it on behalf of an artist and the buyer is in the UK, then there's the 5% import VAT that's due on that work. If they haven't seen the work and the client decides that they don't like it, then they will be entitled to get their, Simon, correct me if I'm wrong, but they will be entitled to get their full money back, including the 5% VAT. I'm not VAT registered, so in that instance, I end up with a liability of the 5% import VAT when I'm returning the money to the artist, if the artist has paid me.
So how do you handle it? What do you do?
There's nothing you can do. Fortunately, that situation hasn't arisen. Fortunately, anybody who's bought a work of art that has been imported, they've actually liked it. But I don't think people are aware of it at all as to how they can deal with it. So.
Wow. And Annya, have you come across any of these problems in your work as an artist?
No, I haven't. Funny enough, I have a lot of friends who sell their works online, but all of my collectors, they come to my studio and I know them personally or through another collector. So I have never, ever sold anything online, which sounds strange in our day and age. Yeah, but you, Paul, your business is based online, basically. Has it
entirely online? Entirely online. We were really the first to say, well, print publications, they're not going to be around for very long. you know, it's not eco-friendly, it's not getting the information out fast enough if you're a monthly publication or even a weekly publication. So we sort of took that in hand and tried to have accurate, up-to-date news within the art world. And we were quite international, even though we were London-centric. But we were also selling art online originally, because when we started as we were really a collective working with Central St. Martin's, and we launched Artlyst so that the graduate program at Central St. Martin's could upload their graduate shows, and because no one was doing it. This is pre-Saatchi Online, which really worked right behind us. And we successfully proved that you could do this and sell artwork online. And so we got funded and started Artlyst, but that really took a back seat to the fact that we were trying to be a news, you know, a full-fledged magazine, art magazine online, with daily updates. But there's other competition now.
What about COVID times? Has it affected you in one way or another?
I think that it's affected us positively, because I think that everybody's getting their information online. And I think that because people are not allowed, or weren't allowed, to go out to galleries and museums, they depended on us for you know, inspiration, amongst other things. And so we've doubled our stats, our monthly stats, during, you know, the high point of COVID. So, you know, it was positive in terms of that for us. Not positive for anyone, but you know, in terms of getting people to look and see what we do, that's really happened in a big way.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will go on to the next point, which is, and I'll direct this to you, Annya, because it really does specifically specify artists. So how does the artist navigate and manipulate the current circumstances going forward?
Ah, interesting. Still trying to find out how it will work, but to be honest, isolation is a part of life for most artists. But I must admit that the current crisis has taken isolation to a completely new level. The last few months have taken me back, I think, to the fundamentals, and made me very aware of the consumer culture and buying too much of anything, including unnecessary art materials. I think that having less heightens your awareness of the harder questions, if that makes sense. And by living with fewer materialistic distraction, I feel like we are more available mentally to make large changes to the society that surrounds us. And I have been creating a lot more on a much deeper level, I think, comparing to before. Also, I think the current pandemic has taught me personally to accept uncertainty as a norm. However, I do feel that because of the pandemic, we're missing out on cultural development, on travel, and so many other vital things. Given the current climate, travel might not be as relevant, but normally it is a huge part of the art world, whether it be flying across the world to biennales, art fairs, panel discussions. The art world has always prided itself on the excitement of travel, and I really miss that. I also think that many artists see themselves as nomads, and we don't really want to be defined by borders. London has become, I think, culturally dead during this period, and I'm so thirsty to walk through beautiful rooms of London museums, and I'm sure so many Londoners feel the same way. Actually, I'm going today to the Victoria and Albert Museum for the first time in a very long time, because it has finally reopened. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think we all are. I've not really been. I went up to Houghton Hall to see Anish Kapoor's exhibition because it was all outdoors,
Yeah.
and that was my first, the first thing that I've seen since lockdown. I locked down about, I don't know, about the 8th or 9th of March, a little bit earlier than some people. I could see that it was coming. I avidly watched the news, and I just said, no, that's it. Simon, how has it affected you? You're working from home, I take it. And how has it affected Mishcon? Are there any redundancies?
It affected me. I'm certainly working from home. I mean, for my practice, we've continued to be busy, and if anything, more busy in advising clients. You know, due to, as I mentioned earlier, the kind of the changed circumstances in which people are buying and selling. With regards to Mishcon, I believe that made it through, or making it through, fairly unscathed at the moment. Obviously, there are areas within the firm that potentially have more work, and there are areas that potentially have less work. But I generally, I think everything seems to be okay. I think it's been strange, certainly for our clients, in first of all having to work out how to adapt to the new normal and to kind of put in place the measures that they need. For myself, I mean, I need a pad of paper and a computer, and I'm good to go. So I can kind of move myself around, and everything's very much online, and the firm's kind of, you know, invested into that to make sure that the kind of that operations can run as smoothly as they can.
Well, I think that, you know, I was already in this almost lockdown frame of mind because my work practices are completely online. So it really doesn't matter where I work from. But the travel has been painful. All of my traveling got cancelled back in March. Some of the things are going ahead. Manifest is going ahead in Marseille, but I'm not going at this stage. I really wish the government could make their minds up as to what we are doing, and just take a firm line on what we should all be doing to get through this. There's too much misinformation out there. Janet, how has this affected you?
Well, it's been positive in many ways because I've been able to work on a lot of proposals for projects for, well, either later on in the year or next year now. So that hasn't affected me. But negatively, I have had a few sales that have been cancelled. I'm finding that people, as we were saying before, they want to see an artwork. I want to see an artwork. I've had a few people inquiring about a photographer that I did an exhibition for last year, and I needed to check to see whether the work was signed or stamped, and I can't do that, so I've lost those sales. Overall, people are still buying, but they're small amounts, so maybe somebody would spend £5,000, $5,000 on a work, but beyond that, no. I have also been working on some blue chip sales, but they haven't happened either, probably because of the travel issues. You know, somebody says, oh, well, there's a major Picasso in a Freeport in Geneva, but we can't see it, so we're not going to buy a Picasso if we can't see it. So in that sense, it's been negative. But overall, I have to say, I'm like Simon, you know, I can work from anywhere. It's just having a computer, really, and hopefully we'll be able to start traveling again, and hopefully be able to go to the exhibitions and the art fairs as everybody enjoys doing. But for the moment, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just staying in London.
No, if only. I just wish this would stop. I hope for a vaccine. I think that's really the silver bullet. The next question is about travel. So I think that we've covered it, actually. Simon, we'll talk to you, Annya, about that because we haven't specifically, but it was a good leader into it. Has this affected you going home, or to going to other you know, countries that you would normally be visiting?
Well, I normally I'm very cautious and mindful of sustainability. So I always try to take a train when it comes to travel, if I'm exhibiting in Europe, for example. But it has stopped me. I was supposed to travel to Israel and Kazakhstan and America, and all of that has cancelled. I also was quite paranoid and scared in March to go anywhere. But I just came back from France, where I drove and I drove back. So that was a nice kind of step towards normality. But I think there's so much uncertainty in everything these days. You just don't know what's going to happen. And so I decided for myself that so much of it is about mental health as well as physical health. And for me, I miss that interaction with people. I love people. I love that chemistry that you get when you talk to people, the inspiration. So I'm being very careful. However, I am stepping forward to kind of to my new normal, if you like. So I do miss interactions with people greatly.
No, I sort of agree that everyone needs to I don't know, come together and socialize again, but really we must not lose sight that this is a pandemic and it's very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dangerous for all of us. None of us are immune.
Yes.
Which brings us to Simon. Do you want to talk a little bit about travel? I don't know if that really affects you and in your line of work.
I mean, it can do. I think, you know, the legal world, similarly to the art world, is relationship based, and so kind of seeing and meeting people is important, not least to kind of discuss what's going on. The courts have remained open throughout, so proceedings have still been going on via video and that sort of thing, so it hasn't really affected us in that manner. I think, you know, it's interesting to kind of see that some fairs have cancelled, you know, totally. Other fairs have gone for the online option. I believe that some sales are happening through the online fairs and through the online viewing. So you know, potentially the need to travel to the art fairs is diminished slightly, provided that the viewing platforms are adequate. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see how it moves forward, you know, not only with regards to kind of upcoming auctions and, you know, the world flocking to London for Old Masters Week or the, you know, to New York for Contemporary Art Week. It'll be interesting to see how it moves forward on that, and whether, you know, we've been talking to auction houses and they are basically putting in place 3 different options. One where everything is online, second one where elements are online, people can bid in person, and the third one where it's as was. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, and you know, with regards to kind of people traveling around the world for the auctions and galleries as well, and fairs.
Now, whilst I have you there, from the legal perspective, how has the art world been assisted by the government? The government seems to be helping artists, but are they really helping the industry?
I'm sure a lot of people will have seen the headlines of it, with the government announcing its 1.57 billion rescue package for the not only the art but general culture and heritage industries. So that represents the biggest ever one-off investment in UK culture. Is set to benefit thousands of organisations across a range of sectors, museums and art galleries included. Of that amount, there's 1.15 billion. There's a support pot for public, private and charitable cultural organisations, which is available by way of emergency grants and loans. And they're issued on the loans are issued on general terms that will be tailored for the recipient. Otherwise, I mean, obviously the art world's benefited from general schemes that the government have put in place, the job retention scheme, small business grants schemes, where eligible businesses can get a one-off £10,000 grant. tax relief, VAT deferral and business rates holiday, and time to pay service, allowing employers and the self-employed to agree alternative payment plans. There's also the museum and galleries exhibition tax relief, where if an exhibition is abandoned at any point during the production phases, the production companies can still claim relief for expenditure incurred before abandonment. And then you've also had, for example, there have been measures put in place to protect commercial tenants from eviction, and also by virtue of the government actually ordering the closure of galleries, there's the ability to make insurance claims for those who have such policies covering government orders closures. Self-employed artists, curators, restorers, they'd be able to take advantage of there's a self-employed income support scheme, which the first grant has closed, but the second and final grant will be opening in August, and it will enable, if they match the relevant criteria, you could potentially get around about £6,000 to £7,000 in total. Otherwise, you've also got the Art Council have been working closely with the government to set up appropriate response to try and support galleries through the new normal and out the other side. So I think that there's a lot in place for not only galleries but also artists, curators, etc. Whether it's all come quickly enough, I'm not so sure. I think the response could have been a bit quicker, given that the extent to which culture kind of adds to the economy in the UK. I think it's vital that it's supported.
Yes. Okay, so I think that we're going to wrap it up a little bit and take some questions from the audience. But first, I'd like a closing statement from you, Annya.
From me, well, it's very hard to make a closing statement on such a huge subject, but I think that we need to prepare to embrace changes as we collectively learn what the art world looks like in the future. And as Janet said before, that we are the ones in a way to decide what it's going to look like in the future. So we have to have some sort of solidarity for the culture industry and try to work it out to make sure that it's as beneficial to everyone as it can possibly be. And as Simon said, the culture industry in Britain is a huge soft power tool and has to be addressed appropriately and treated appropriately as well.
And Janet?
Well, I certainly agree with what Annya has said, and you, Paul and Simon. I think at the moment we're still in this stage of uncertainty, but we have to move forward as positively as we can, look for alternative ways of doing things, realise that there is a new normal now, whatever the new normal is, and work with it. Don't think that things are going to go back the way they were before the lockdown, because they weren't. So we have to be positive and look forward.
And
I personally think it's fairly admirable, and I think the art world in the UK has reacted quite amazingly with the collaborations and the embracement of existing and new technologies. I think it's quite amazing to see what they've done, and I hope that it continues to do so going forward. Obviously, from my working perspective, that gives rise to kind of new legal risks that I think people need to be cognizant of. It's ever changing, and it's something that just needs to be kept an eye on. But I think it's exciting, and I think it's interesting to see what will happen next.
Okay, well, for me, I really think that everybody has to be sensible through all of this. And yes, we all want to go out and go back to what we had before. It's not going to ever be it won't be the same for many, many years. I'm not going to say ever. but you can still visit galleries and museums. You have to wear a mask. You have to book far in advance. So it's not something that, it's taken a bit of the spontaneity out of it. But I think that we will get through this. And I think that the art world is a very resilient line of professionals, and I think that, you know, things will carry on, and I think that something positive will come out of this. Okay, so let's go on to the Q&A. If anyone has any questions, please ask. So the first one we have from Amanda Gray. What changes does this panel anticipate as we move into the new normal with regard to the business side of art transactions and collecting? Let's start with Janet on that.
Thank you. I think, as I was saying before, certain things are changing now. From a price perspective, as I said before, I'm finding a lot more transactions are taking place below the $5,000 mark, £5,000 mark. I think some of the other galleries are finding the same thing, that it's the lower range of works that are selling, and indeed for them the upper range, but it's the mid-range where we've got the problems. With the auction houses, I think they've been doing incredibly well, but they are presenting material at the moment that people are familiar with, that they've seen before. You know, in 6 months' time or a year's time, is that really going to be the same thing? There's also perhaps a lot less transparency now in the auctions, because previously when there was a live auction, you'd be able to attend the auction and see who was buying the work, which is an important part of the trade. You need to know who's collecting what, or even if it's through a dealer, it's usually known who they're buying for. That has completely stopped. It's changed. The auctions have been trying to be more international now. Both Christie's and Sotheby's have been holding international sales. How successful that's been, I don't know, but they've both put a lot of money and effort and time into building up their new technologies. So in that sense, things are changing, but it is still about buying and selling art, meeting new artists, seeing new work, getting enjoyment, emotional pleasure out of art, and that won't change at all.
A question for Simon. What will be the legal challenges as we move forward into a new way of operating within the art market?
I mean, some of them I suppose we've covered with regards to dealing with online sales and the means of the warranties and conditions and protections that need to be put into that. Similarly, kind of limitations on liabilities are important. One of the things I think makes it slightly more difficult as well transacting in this landscape is the fact that without the face-to-face relationship, there's higher possibility of not knowing who your counterparty is, who's the owner of the artwork. I think that there's going to be a requirement for more due diligence to be done, not by the buyer, not only into who they're purchasing the artwork from, but also the artwork itself, you know, looking at kind of the condition and that sort of thing. There's also, I suppose, a higher chance of fraud, whether that's, you know, cyber fraud, more hacking or that sort of thing going on. So I think that the art market needs to be very alive to that. And I suppose also, as I mentioned earlier, with regards to if everything is being viewed online, it's not necessarily going to look an artwork's not necessarily going to look the same as on the screen as it is when it arrives.
There's also been an enormous crackdown on the antiquities market over this period. Can you sort of elaborate on that?
I think a large part of that's already due to legislation that's in place, whether it's EU or worldwide legislation. One of the things I find quite interesting is the EU at the moment are actually talking about putting in place legislation for import certificates, so bringing items, antiquities into Europe. dependent on what it is, that you either need an import certificate or potentially you need to put forward a statement of precisely its country of origin. So I think they're being very hot on that. A large part of it stemmed from anti-money laundering crackdown, the crackdown on on money laundering, and also with regards to stopping the import of antiquities from, for example, Syria and Iraq, to seek to prevent the country, in essence, having its culture stolen while it's in unstable times.
This question, thank you, Simon. That was very eloquent. This question is for you, Anya, from Jamshed Safarov, and he or she, is it he? That name?
It's a he, I think.
Okay, so Jamshed says, one of the results of the long lockdown period is a huge growth in the number of amateur artists, and some of them started even selling their work. Do you see this as a challenge for professionals, or rather as a new and promising development in the art world in general?
No, I personally think if that's the case, I think it is a promising development. And the funny thing about the art world is that the more limitations you have, the more expandable and creative it becomes. So I think it's a great news, to be honest.
And I think a final question now. This is from KT Barrett, who says, the other major event in the last few months has been the wave of Black Lives Matter protests and responses from cultural organizations. Does the panel think that there are outcomes of the lockdown pandemic which can be harnessed positively to make a more equitable sector? Janet, let's hear from you on that.
Thank you. It's difficult to say whether or not the two are mutually exclusive. Clearly, we're all witnessing now a huge change as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement, which can only be positive. But I think it's really up to the institutions, the galleries, the collectors, the media to really, as I've said before, I always believe in being positive about things. They have to make a real positive change. So that does mean bringing more of the ethnic community on board for employment, giving them the roles that they deserve. And obviously it is subject to the pandemic, but I think it's important. I think a lot of people are quite concerned now that maybe everybody's just doing it as a knee-jerk reaction, and is it really genuine, or are people just trying to get brownie points for saying, well, yes, we've got a Black curator on board now? So I think it's about being authentic and genuine and really going deep into the infrastructure of the whole art world, not just say in the US, but internationally. And again, I mean, yes, it's important for Black Lives Matter, but there are several other minorities as well who've been completely sidelined, and I think it's important that they're given a voice too. But if we all do a little small change, then gradually, then hopefully the whole system will change, whether it's because of or despite the COVID and the lockdown.
Well, I think that about sums it all up for me, and that was very well put. I think we're going to end the discussion now, unless there is something that someone wants to mention before I thank you all for joining in. Anything else from the panel? Okay, I want to thank Annya Sand, who our artist today, who without this it probably wouldn't have come about, and I think we should do more of these things. I want to thank the art dealer who mostly deals in Middle Eastern art, which I love, Janet Raddy, who if you don't know what she does, go online and look at her website. The other thing is with Anya, please go and look at her website. Just key in her name into Google and key Janet Raddy's name into Google, and they'll come up very quickly. I want to thank Simon very much for joining us today. Well coordinated, and thank you very much to Francesca Kohler, who again organized everything from behind the scenes. Again, without Francesca, this never would have happened. So thank you very much, and let's do it again.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Bye.
Bye.